This afternoon, Books and Books, in collaboration with Exchange for Change, is honored to welcome back Mr. Leonard Pitts Jr., presenting his new novel, Grant Park. And here to introduce Mr. Pitts, we have a special guest. She is the founder of the Exchange for Change. Please welcome to the podium Ms. Kathy Klarich.
Thank you. Done? Okay. Leonard Pitts' long and distinguished career seems to include as many awards as it does published works. It's no surprise that he uses one word to describe himself: writer. Writing is the cornerstone of Exchange for Change, the nonprofit I'm representing today. Again, my name is Kathy Klarich, and I'm honored to have this opportunity to introduce Mr. Pitts and tell you a little bit about Exchange for Change. We teach writing in correctional institutions, and we pair our inside students with high school and college students on the outside. Our goal is to break down a divide that separates these two communities, to nurture skills that lead to a meaningful life on the inside and a productive life after release, while simultaneously fostering compassion in our students on the outside. Inmates, who prefer to be called prisoners, volunteer to take our courses. They learn about writing, literature, poetry, fiction, and nonfiction. Although they are not typical of every prisoner, our prisoners have chosen to use the time they're serving to educate themselves, better themselves, expand their understanding of the world. Writing offers that opportunity. For 2 hours a week, they can be people, not numbers. They can express themselves in a safe, non-threatening environment. Our outside partners include students at the University of Miami, Florida Atlantic University, Ransom Everglades, Miami-Dade College, Pace Center for Girls. In our exchange courses, the inside and outside students read and write about the same stories, poems, and essays, using literature to begin their anonymous written exchanges. The outside students have a unique chance to see their partners as more than the worst thing they ever did. They view them not as convicts, but as fathers and mothers, sisters and brothers, sons and daughters. Their exchanges reveal that they have more in common than they might initially have thought. As a result of their correspondence, some students have switched their future career goals towards social justice. Many of these students will go on to be change makers. These exchanges have long-lasting memories. Students on the inside improve their writing skills and also their sense of self-worth. Their self-confidence grows in an environment designed to strip them of any individuality. Bonds form in the classroom that transcend normal prison barriers of race and ethnicity. More than 2/3 of all prisoners will be released. They will be your neighbors. They will work in stores you frequent and places where you do business. We want to provide them with as many skills as possible to ease their transition, to participate in our community, to stay out of the system for good. Programs such as ours help reduce recidivism by more than 40%. Released prisoners have a 13% greater chance of getting a job if they're enrolled in programs like Exchange for Change while they're doing their time. Florida has the third highest rate of incarceration in the country. Blacks make up the majority of American prisoners. This past March, Leonard Pitts appeared here at Books and Books with Michelle Alexander. Her compelling book, The New Jim Crow, highlights that African Americans are far and away more likely to be jailed for drug crimes. In a column this January, Pitts wrote, "When black men are set free after doing their time, they enter a legal purgatory where the right to vote, work, go to school, or rent an apartment can be legally denied." In a September column entitled, "It's Time to Talk About Solutions," Mr. Pitts argues that until we confront our ingrained racist assumptions and deinstitutionalize discriminatory policies, there will be no solution to mass incarceration. How, he asks, does it feel to find a solution? We believe our program is a small first step. Last summer, we started with one writing class in one correctional institution. This year, we have 11 classes in 5 institutions. We've reached hundreds of students. we have the support of the Department of Corrections because they recognize that this program is making a difference. If you're interested in finding out more about what Exchange for Change does, how you can get involved, and what you can do to support our nonprofit, please stop by our table over on this side, and of course, only after you purchased Grant Park by Mr. Pitts. Mr. Pitts has been part of the solution for more than 35 years. He began his career at age 5, published at age 12, and got his first paycheck for writing at 18. He's been a college professor, a radio producer, an author, a lecturer, and a syndicated columnist. He was originally hired by the Miami Herald to critique music, but within a few years he received his own column in which he dealt extensively with race, politics, and culture. His column following 9/11, An Angry Letter to Terrorists, went viral. He received more than 30,000 emails. The text has been set to music and reprinted in poster form. In 2004, he won a Pulitzer Prize for commentary. His words are bold, provocative, aggressive, effective. He uses them to address the cancers that fester and infect our society, inspiring us to be more proactive and engaged, to make our community a healthier place. He's not afraid to add a shot of reality to our morning coffee, to challenge us to rethink our norms, to dare us to make a difference. Grant Park is his third novel. It explores the state of U.S. relations in 1968 and 2008 as seen through the eyes of two veteran Chicago newsmen, one black, one white. The divide of the past is echoed in the realities of the future. Pitt's fiction, like his columns, provide us an opportunity to think about our own responsibility in shaping that destiny. Please join Exchange for Change in welcoming Leonard Pitts.
Thank you very much, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good. I had not heard too much about Exchange for Change until I was contacted a few days ago, but I have to say that what I was told and then what I've heard just a moment ago, I'm very impressed. And I've already told them, I mean, I'm not here that often, but I've already told them that whatever I can do, I'd be happy to do just as a writer, because I think they may be onto something. I'd like to be part of it. Want to spend a few moments talking about my latest novel, Grant Park. Thank you all, first of all, for coming out. I'm not just saying this because Mitch is over there, but Books and Books always does me right. I just got to say this. It's one of my favorite places to come. I'm very pleased to be here. Want to spend a few moments talking about Grant Park, and then probably and at the end read you a longish excerpt, which will probably define the book a little bit better than I can. Essentially, what I wanted to write about in this book, I keep hearing from reviewers that I've written a political thriller, and okay, I'm glad to hear that, but that's not what I set out to write. What I set out to write was a book about race and disillusionment, and the path of 40 years, essentially the distance from Martin Luther King's assassination in 1968 to Barack Obama's election 40 years later in 2008. And I told this story through the lives of two men. So let me give you a brief sketch of these two guys, then I'll read you this excerpt. The first is Malcolm Marcus Toussaint. He was actually born Moselle Uriah Wilson Jr., a name that he hated because it's country. So he chose to, it's 1968. He wants to rename himself for revolutionaries, because that's the kind of guy he is. So he names himself Malcolm for X, Marcus for Garvey, Toussaint for Toussaint L'Ouverture. And he's a very bright young man. He's got from Memphis. He's got a scholarship to a prestigious school, but he blows off the scholarship and ends up getting sent home on academic probation, because instead of going to school, he is busier writing what he calls protest graffiti on the side of the administration building. Some of you who remember 1968 will, probably be able to empathize, if not remember when you did something similar. And so he gets sent home, where his father is a sanitation worker who is on strike. One of the men that Martin Luther King has come to town to help. Malcolm, like a lot of young men in 1968, does not have a lot of respect for Martin Luther King and or the whole civil rights movement. Their motto at that point is freedom now, and so they don't have patience for what they see as these slow tactics of reasoning, the slow tactics of marching, the slow tactics of singing "We Shall Overcome" and waiting for some legislation to be put in place. They want freedom now, and if that means they've got to break a window to get your attention, if that means they've got to set something on fire to get your attention, then that's what they want to do. And now those of you who remember the history will remember that Dr. King led a march at the end of March in 1968 that erupted in violence. I believe it was the only march that he ever led that erupted in violence. And in my fiction, Malcolm is one of the main actors in causing that violence. Malcolm is one of the young men who goes there with the intention and purpose of disrupting the march. Now, this has some tragic and unforeseen consequences for him, but one of the major consequences, one of the things that changes his life, is that he goes to work that night. He's working as a janitor at the Holiday Inn overlooking the Mississippi River. He goes out at 2 o'clock in the morning to take his break, and there's this guy standing there drinking a bourbon and smoking a cigarette. And he turns around, the guy is Martin Luther King. So they have this long discussion about violence, about nonviolent resistance. And at the end of it, Malcolm is a young man who's changed. Malcolm is a young man who decides that, maybe I've been wrong about this. Maybe I need to reconsider where I'm coming from. Maybe I need to go back to school and embrace nonviolent protest. And a week later, when Dr. King returns to town, he is going to tell him this. You've changed my life. You really had an impact. And he is walking toward him at 6 o'clock p.m. on the 4th of April on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. And Dr. King is just turning to acknowledge him when he is shot in the face and he's killed by James Earl Ray lurking across the street. So Malcolm, goes away from that moment, filled with this idea that he's going to use these tools. He's going to use the tools that Dr. King has encouraged him to use to make change. And he spends 40 years. He becomes a celebrated columnist. He's a winner of 2 Pulitzer Prizes. So this is not me. This is not a stand-in for me. He's got 2 Pulitzer Prizes and a radio show. I don't have those things. This is not me, but he spends 40 years, as a celebrated columnist for this fictional newspaper, the Chicago Post, writing a lot about race and trying to, explain, and reason this country. And when we meet him in 2008, he is disillusioned, to say the least. He is bitter, he is angry, he is upset, and it all comes to a head for him one night when he receives an email from a reader. It's not, if you're a black opinion writer, it's nothing you haven't received before. It's your typical racist email, and typically when you receive this email, you remember, okay, this is why God invented the delete button, and you press the delete button and you move on with your life. Malcolm, for whatever reason, this one night he just can't do that. He snaps, and he writes an angry, over-the-top, go to hell America, go to hell white people column, and then he takes it to his editors and said, here's my column, publish this. And his editor says no, and he goes over his editor's head to the publisher, and the publisher says, quote, "This will run in my newspaper the day after Sarah Palin weds Jeremiah Wright on a nude beach in Jamaica." So, chances are very small. So Malcolm goes to a bar, and he spends the afternoon, getting a little tanked, and he has one of those ideas. It seems like a great idea when you're a little tanked. What the hell? They don't want to publish it, but I know my bosses, I know my editor's computer password. I'll just go back there and publish it myself. So he goes back into the newsroom, 11:15 at night, before the presses have run, but after pretty much all the reporters and editors have left. And he's sitting at his boss's computer, and he has another great idea. Well, the hell with it. If I'm going to publish it, I might as well put it on the front page. So this column that should never appear anywhere appears on the front page of the Chicago Post on Election Day 2008. And everybody's looking for Malcolm on Election Day. Nobody can find him. And as the reader, and Malcolm knows as the guy who's suffering this, that he's actually been kidnapped by Clarence Pym and Dwayne McLarty. They call themselves the White Resistance Army. Notice I said there are 2 of them, but they call themselves the White Resistance Army. You've got, they would prefer to be known as Sergeant Clarence Pym and Captain Dwayne McLarty. They're a little bit screwy in the head, but they're also very dangerous. And they've kidnapped him as part of their plot to assassinate the president-elect by blowing up a bomb that night in Grant Park. So that's Malcolm's Day. Yeah, I know, not a great day. Which brings us to Bob. Bob Carson is this very fundamentally decent Christian white kid, middle-class white kid from Minneapolis, who in 1967-68, has been profoundly affected by what he's seen of the civil rights movement, and he wants to make a change. He wants to know if he has the strength to do what he has seen so many people doing on newsreel footage, which is, go down and put my body in harm's way for somebody else's freedom. You have to remember there were so many, very heroic, white Americans who were doing these things back in the 60s. There's James Reeb, there's James Werg, there's Viola Liuzzo, and there's so many other people who, went down there and did this. He wants to be one of those people. So he goes down, he spurns, college acceptance letters from Yale, from USC, to go down to a little Bible college in North Mississippi that no one's ever heard of, and become an activist. And he is, he becomes an activist, but he also becomes deeply involved with this young African-American woman, Janika Lattimore. She is his first love. Anybody remember the first love? The one that just, yeah, okay. Janika blows his mind as surely as if she had been a 12-gauge shotgun. Janika just blows this man's mind. He is completely in love with and besotted with her. He's deeply, profoundly crazy about her. So they end up, he's always wanted to march behind Martin Luther King. He's dreamt of marching behind Martin Luther King like some kids dream of playing catch with Mickey Mantle. And he gets his chance because there's going to be a march up in Memphis, about an hour away. So he and Janika drive up to Memphis, and as I said a moment ago, that march doesn't end well. It ends in a riot. Bob is beaten during that riot by this black guy who jumps on him for no particular reason other than that he's white and he's handy. And the black guy's got his anger to work out, so he starts using Bob as a punching bag and beats him pretty badly, and Janika saves his life. And they run back to the school. And he thinks that's the worst thing that's going to happen to him that day, but Janika dumps him that day for reasons that you'll hear in the excerpt. Janika dumps him, this girl that he's so deeply, madly crazy about. So flash forward 40 years later, and Bob has what I like to call compassion fatigue, which you sometimes see, which you sometimes see in people of a certain age. Bob's feeling is, look, when there were signs up there that said whites only, or that you couldn't have a hamburger at this lunch counter, or that, or whatever, you couldn't vote. I understood, but I don't understand when you're talking about structural racism. What does that mean? And why do I have to defend affirmative action? Because that's just taking a job or a place from some white guy and giving it to somebody black who may not be as qualified. So he feels that he has lost empathy with African American issues. But it's not just a matter of the times having changed. It's also a matter of he never got over that girl, Janika Lattimore. So yeah, he's got compassion fatigue, but he's also got, damn, that woman just dumped me, and I loved her so much. So Bob grows up. Bob becomes an editor for a newspaper in Chicago, and he's dealing with with these things. And one morning at 6 a.m., he gets a phone call. Hey Bob, you know that column that you rejected from your columnist, your star columnist? It's in the paper this morning, on the front page. The boss is extremely not happy, and we're all having a meeting at 7 a.m. Anytime you're having a meeting, you're called into a meeting at 7 a.m., not going to be a good day. So this excerpt that I'm going to read you takes Bob from just after he's gotten that phone call and hung up, and he's got to head into the office. Time was short, but Bob didn't go flying to his bedroom to get dressed. Instead, he picked up the paper and, almost as if in a trance, began to read Malcolm's column, the column that he, Bob, had rejected emphatically and then personally spiked to the delete basket, the one that had somehow risen from the dead. It said, "Good morning, friends and neighbors. What you read here today are the musings of a tired man. Tired from what, you will ask yourselves? What can Toussaint have to be tired about? He is a respected journalist. He is paid more than he deserves. He has two of the greatest kids in the world, and he was lucky enough to be loved by a woman who was gracious and kind and smart and stunning, and who stayed married to Toussaint for 27 years until her death in 2006, despite the fact that he was none of those things, and everyone knew she was far too good for him. What in the world does Toussaint have to complain about? Well, it's simple, really. I'm sick and tired of white folks' bullshit. I know the language catches some of you by surprise, but there you go. 2 weeks ago, I wrote a column. You may remember it. It was about Dante Stoddard, the 22-year-old African-American man, father of three, who died in a hail of bullets. 52 shots were fired, 27 struck home, when he was confronted by Chicago police late one night outside a McDonald's restaurant. Police say they shot Stoddard because he reached into his pocket and produced a wallet that officers mistook for a gun. Witnesses said that that was a lie. Security camera footage backs them up. It clearly shows Stoddard with takeout bags of fast food in each hand. He transfers them both to one hand and begins reaching toward his hip pocket to produce his ID. But before his hand even reaches the pocket, much less pulls anything out, the shooting begins and continues for 12 excruciating seconds. After all that, police said the man they were looking for when they stopped Stoddard on suspicion of armed robbery actually bore no resemblance to him. 10 years older, 50 pounds heavier, and with a medium afro where Stoddard wore dreadlocks. The only thing they had in common is that they were both black men. Apparently, that was enough. In the column, I called the cops out for the execution of yet another black man under dubious circumstances and demanded a Justice Department investigation. In response, I just received the following email from a man named Joe McPherson, which I present to you now in its entirety. Toussaint, you're so stupid. And you have to get the picture. Your is Y-O-U-R and not an apostrophe in sight, okay? Got that? Okay. Toussaint, you're so stupid. Do you really expect us to shed tears because this guy is dead? You're just another whiny, brainwashed lib who doesn't have the brains to see the truth or the balls to tell it. Fact, niggers commit the majority of the crimes in this country, so don't blame the police for this man being dead. Blame yourselves. If you really want to help your people, why don't you tell them to stop committing all the crimes? This guy Stoddard had a record for drug dealing and domestic violence. I noticed you didn't write about that. Or you could tell them to stop making babies they can't take care of. Stoddard had 3 kids with 3 different women, and he was only 22. That's something else you didn't say. No, you always want to put everything on white people. Your hatred of white America shines through with everything you write. You're such a racist nigger. Always playing the race card, always stirring the pot. It's race baiters like you who are destroying this country. And it's people like me who won't let you. This is America, pal. Love it or leave it. Now, I don't present this email to you because it is particularly outlandish. It's a rare day when I don't get a half dozen or more just like it or worse. No, I present it to you because it represents that final drop of water that makes the bucket overflow. I repeat, I'm tired of white folks' bullshit. In the first place, and I realize this is petty, but this is my rant, so humor me, does this email not tell you everything you need to know about declining educational standards in this country? Can you appreciate how truly frustrating it is for an educated man such as myself to have his intelligence impugned by someone who failed to master 5th grade English? You're so stupid? Really? That may be the single most maddening sentence I have ever read in my life, although "you're such a racist nigger" would also have to be in contention. And would someone please buy this man a box of apostrophes? As to the rest of it, well, I don't propose to go through it point by point. I've already said what I had to say about the execution of Dante Stoddard, and for that matter, about black crime, black babies, and the criminalization of black existence. You may look it up if you care to. I didn't write this column to say any of that. I wrote it only to say I give up, I surrender, uncle. As many of you know, I once met a great man, his name was Martin Luther King Jr., who counseled me to have patience and faith where the people he called our white brothers are concerned. I was a young man with a young man's impatience and rage. My father was a Memphis sanitation worker, one of the men Dr. King had come to town to help, one of the men who paraded through downtown every day with a sign that said, "I am a man," because white folks needed the reminder. I didn't want to march. I wanted to burn. I wanted to destroy. I wanted to tear down the world until everybody in it felt my impotent fury. Dr. King told me not to waste my life that way. Patience and faith, he said. Well, here we are 40 years later, friends and neighbors, and I am out of patience, and I am out of faith. I don't want to burn or destroy or tear down. I just want to surrender, to publicly divest myself of the foolish notion that white people can be redeemed, that they can be influenced to once and for all give up the asinine delusion that melanin correlates to intelligence, morality, or worth. I no longer believe they can. And yes, someone will point out that 40 years after Dr. King spoke to me, here we are with a black man running for president. What about that, they will say? Doesn't that prove patience and faith have paid off? Well, what about that? Barack Obama has faced not just the ordinary political questions about his policies, his plans, and his experience, but also a series of extraordinary questions unique to him. Was he really born in the USA? Is he secretly a Muslim? Is he secretly a terrorist? Does he hate whitey? White people ask these questions because they can't bring themselves to ask what they really want to ask. Who is this nigger to think he should be our president? And when Obama gets his ass kicked, and he makes that call tonight to congratulate John McCain on winning the presidency, when the social scientists start talking about the Bradley effect and the hidden racism polling did not detect, ask yourself, could it really have ended otherwise? Could white people have done anything other than what they did? If you think that, then you don't know white people. I do. That's why I have given up on them. So Joe McPherson, thank you for being that one drop and for thereby helping me to clarify something I have been struggling with for a very long time. Now please go to hell and take America with you. Bob sighed. He sat looking for a moment at the paper, Malcolm smiling a smug little smile and looking younger than he was in a SIG photo that was probably 10 years out of date. Finally, Bob stood and went about replacing the bags in the refrigerator, putting the skillet in the sink. There would be no breakfast this morning. As Bob was absorbing that minor disappointment, his telephone chirped again, this time the tone alerting him to the arrival of an email. Bob resented the slightly Pavlovian way the little device had trained him to pick it up at the ringing of a bell to see some ad for erectile dysfunction or plea for help from a distressed Nigerian. For a brief moment, he thought of allowing the chirp to go unanswered. Didn't he have more important things to be worried about? But in the end, he surrendered as he had known he would, picked up the phone and clicked open his email. "A name from your past," read the subject line. Bob opened it. What he saw put him back in the chair. "Old friend, you cannot imagine my delight at running across your name while doing some research on the Post website. Well, not just your name. There are a million Bob Carsons in the world after all, but also your picture. That's what sealed it for me. Even after all these years, I'd have known you anywhere. I have always regretted the way it was left between us, the things I said to you so long ago in all my youthful self-righteousness and ideological purity. I've thought of you often and wondered what became of you. These past few months, I have been working in minority outreach for Senator Obama. I am on a plane right now and will land in Chicago at 10:30. I will be homeless for a few hours, unable to check into my room until this afternoon. I know this is criminally short notice, and I will understand if you can't do it, but if at all possible, might we have lunch today? I've missed you, Bob. I'd love to catch up with you. More than that, I'd simply love to see you again. Let me know." It was signed, Janika Lattimore. Janika Lattimore. He said it in a whisper, just to hear it being said, just to have the words on his tongue and the sound in his ear. All at once, Bob realized he had stopped breathing. He breathed. He was a trim and orderly man in wire-frame glasses, pink scalp peeking through the thin canopy of hair at the crown of his head. Once upon a time, back when his hair had fallen to below his shoulder blades, back when he was another man in another life, he had loved Janika Lattimore. Helplessly, that was how he had loved her, completely. And she had broken his heart. No, that wasn't quite right. She had not broken his heart. She had broken him. She had left him lying in pieces on a dirt road in Mississippi, and for the longest time he had not known if, or even cared if, he could put himself together again. And even when he finally decided to get on with it, even when he did manage to put the pieces back together into something that vaguely resembled Robert Matthew Carson, it had never quite been the same. He felt like a piece of china glued back together by a sixth grader. The pieces didn't quite fit. The break still was visible. Bob had never loved again, never allowed himself to. There had been relationships, yes. He had even lived for a couple of years with a free-spirited painter in a crummy little apartment in Soho, and she had borne him a son he adored. But he had never married, much less immersed himself in a woman that way again. Now he was 59 years old, and after all this time, Here she was, blowing through town, blowing back into his life, and wanting to get together for lunch? Bob felt anger kindling in him at the nerve of her to show up 40 years later as an email in his inbox, blithely inviting him to catch up on old times, as if what had happened had never happened, as if she had not told him that they had no future because he was white and she was not, as if he, with an ice pack to his head and blood dripping off his chin, sitting in the back of that ambulance, had not begged her to stay, as if she had not turned away from him, literally turned away from him, to be with her people. That's how she had put it in that self-consciously melodramatic way of college radicals of the 1960s, for whom the revolution was a foregone conclusion. Her people. I thought I was your people too, he had said, his voice wounded and confused as the ambulance door closed on him. He had always wondered if she heard him, and if she did, if she had answered. He didn't know. The door had closed like finality, and he had never seen nor heard from her again. Then his phone had chirped, and there she was inviting him to lunch. There was an absurdity to it that almost wrung a bitter laugh out of him. Almost. Bob glanced at his watch. It was a few minutes after 6. He needed to hurry if he was going to make the meeting. He pressed a button and the screen on his cell phone went dark. But it was an effort just to get up out of the chair. Janika Lattimore, he said, walking down the hallway to his bedroom to get dressed. So that's Bob's day going to hell. I will close by saying this. People ask me, what's the takeaway from this book? And as a novelist, you hope the first takeaway is that people are entertained and that they are invested and involved in the book. But to the degree that there's anything else, I think it's to reconsider this this disillusionment, this malaise that we seem to be in, some of us with regard to race, and it's also to understand that none of us are going anywhere. We're kind of stuck with each other. We got this one country, and we're all kind of stuck with each other. So the idea that is cherished sometimes among African Americans of separatism, that either we're going to go to Africa or we're going to give us 4 or 5 states and we'll just call it a day, not going to happen. The idea that is too often cherished by white Americans of, why don't they just shut up? Not going to happen, because people, when people are crying out, you have to understand people don't cry out for no reason. People cry out when they're in pain. And this whole narrative which says that, everything's hunky-dory. I don't know why you people are still hollering. Must be something culturally wrong with you. That thug culture or something must be wrong with you. If people don't credit black people as authentic and credible witnesses of their own experience, then there's always going to be hollering. So I think that we need to get past both those things. We need to understand that this is our country. This is our country. We are all Americans, and it's up to us to figure out a way to live in it in peace and prosperity, I guess. Thank you. Now, some questions? Okay, questions. Or I can ask you questions however you want to do it. Yes, hi.
I came to the store last Sunday and I bought your book there.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I knew that I had seen a review of it,
Uh-huh.
and I read it this week.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to steal your thunder from the readers before they read it. So talking about the takeaway and the feeling that you get at the end. I was puzzled because at the end of the book, I wasn't quite sure. Of course, there are different voices at the end of the book.
Okay.
I wasn't quite sure
Okay.
whether you were hopeful or despairing.
I'll stop you. We're going to be speaking over the heads of everybody here who hasn't read the book, okay?
I don't want to ask about the book. I want to ask about you. Let me
Okay,
ask you something.
shoot.
And let me read to you something that you wrote a little bit over 2 years ago.
Okay.
This was on November 4th. The Sunday. This was published in the Herald, November 4th, 2 days before Election Day 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Now finally, we see Election Day. You will find no words about reconciliation here this time around.
Mm-hmm.
No suggestion the 60s might finally be at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Just a lament for the naive optimism that makes such a suggestion possible, and for a nation where these days optimism is often devoured by rage.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out the mythic past dies harder than anyone ever knew. So my question to you is, are you a little bit more hopeful than you were in 2012?
I think that I have a pragmatic optimism. We'll put it like that. And I think, that frankly is what the end of the book was dealing with as well. It's, I think unalloyed optimism kind of misses, you've got to acknowledge what's going on in front of you. You got to acknowledge the world as it is. But I think that if you've truly given up, then there's no point in getting up in the morning. You understand what I'm saying? So I think there always must be hope. Dr. King used to like to say, only when it's dark enough can you see the stars. And I think that there's a certain amount of truth in that. So I am hopeful, but I am not fooling myself at all about the forces that we face these days. I think that, that's been, I think, part of my personal journey and my personal problem for 40 years, because I grew up in the 70s, the first post-civil rights generation. And I thought you couldn't have told me everything wasn't hunky-dory. Racism was what you laughed at on All in the Family. Didn't have anything to do with me. That was Archie Bunker, And what I have learned, spent 40 years learning, is how naive I was in 1974, 75, 76. That there are real and enduring problems and real and enduring, strains of in the American character that, don't die as easily as we would like to think. They don't die because Martin Luther King said, "I have a dream." They don't die because Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Bill. So, I forget who said it, but the price of eternal vigilance is the price of freedom is, I think, one of the truest things ever said. And I think that African American, or that race relations in this country, is one of the great proofs of that. Who else? Hi.
Hi. I started reading a lot of your articles and Write On as a teen.
Did you actually say Write On as in Write On magazine?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Oh. What do you think has been the motivating factor, or what's propelled you to where you're at in your career now? What's guided you?
Not stopping. I tell people all the time that as a writer, I was during the introduction you heard that my career started when I was 5, which is not quite right, because I actually started, but I did define myself as a writer from that age, and I've always known what I was put here to do, and I've always known the gift that I was given. I don't know that I have any other gifts. But this I know how to do. So there's always been a theme through my life of holding on to this, whether it's doing me real good or whether it's doing me poorly. I think that particularly in terms of a career in an artistic pursuit, I don't think you can overstate the importance of just persistence, of just staying with it, whether you love it or whether it loves you or not. I think persistence is a big part of it. You're welcome. Who else? Oh, I love a shy group. Yes.
Leonard, Joan Chrisos.
I thought I recognized you back there. Hey.
So we just had this incident in Palm Beach where there was a man sitting on the side of the road.
I've heard about that.
And, next thing you know, he's shot dead by a cop. I mean, when does this end? It just seems that, we talked about in the newsroom. It's like, why is it that with my son sitting by the side of the road, chances are he wouldn't have been shot.
Yeah.
Why is this a continual drumbeat, it seems?
Well, I think that there's a lot of answers to that, Joan. I think a big part of the problem is that this country has grown incredibly comfortable with defining black in terms of crime and or threat. And the evidence of that and the evidence of the wrongness of that are right in front of our eyes at all times, okay? But we refuse to see that. So if you go down, and I haven't been to a Miami County courthouse in I don't know when, but I would be willing to wager anybody that if you went to the courthouse right now, wherever the drug cases are being adjudicated, you would find well above 50% of those, being hauled in shackles to be African American or black. But the fact of the matter is, and because I've written this in the column, I don't know how many times, African Americans account for 15% of drug use, about 15% of drug crime, right on line with our numbers in society. We're 13% of the society, about 15% of the drug crime. But we have grown so comfortable with that you would see that in the courtroom, and it would not seem as abnormal and as perverted and as bizarre as it is to you, because we see it all the time. I think we in media have been major culprits, particularly broadcast media. With this whole idea of if it bleeds, it leads, and and it seems like there's always, there's always some crime in the inner city that is leading the charge. People, have this absolute belief that, as my fictional guy here in the book says, black people commit all the crime. Black kids have that belief. I know because I've questioned them here in South Florida. I did a Q&A with a bunch of black kids. Show of hands, Black kids have that belief. So until and unless we begin to correct the record and to educate ourselves and to accept the existence of and responsibility for our own inbred bias in this country, we're always going to be coming back to that. The discussion about police too often devolves to, oh, you must hate police, or well, there's a few bad apples, but no, it's not about that. It's about the fact that we have a society which operates on biases that it refuses to acknowledge. And the only thing that's different about the police interactions that we're talking about is somebody dies. But the same thing happens every day on every street corner in America. You see what I'm saying? There was a study I saw, which I thought was fascinating a few months ago, where they took writing samples around to, I think, 30 or 60 law firms. They were mediocre writing samples, supposedly from an applicant for the law firm. And I think there were like 14 mistakes that they intentionally inserted into this example. And they told half of the recipients of this that the writer was Jamal or some other identifiably African-American name. The other half gets Justin or Todd, some white name. And would you be shocked that the people who saw the Jamal, one, they rated the writing samples lower and they found more mistakes? Okay. The people who saw the same writing, people who saw the writing and thought it was from Justin or Todd, the writing magically improved. Okay, this is what we're talking about. This is the bias that we have, and we have, we refuse as a society, as a country, to challenge ourselves on this. So that, that's a long answer to a short question, I guess, but that's where that comes from. And I think that in news media, broadcast media, and frankly, and also, in what we do for a living, we should take it as our obligation to challenge this, because that's the root of all of this other stuff we're talking about. It's the root of higher unemployment. That's the root of higher incarceration. That's the root of the education gap. That's the root of, black toddlers in preschool get disciplined more often than white toddlers. So, like, how do you fail sandbox, Okay? That's the root of all of this. And until we really grapple with that, we're always going to be having these issues. Yes?
Finger on something I think at the very beginning of your talk, where you said, if we don't, and I paraphrase, if I misrepresent, you'll let me know. If we don't find a way of giving credibility to the pain and credibility to the experience of Black Americans, then we're not getting anywhere.
Right.
We're not going to get anywhere. I wonder if you have any insight into the next step of how to credentialize that pain, right? How to kind of create a space where those voices are validated,
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know how you create the space where those voices are validated, and I don't know if it is a space, because if it's sort of like this, I get what you're saying, but if it's sort of like this special spot on the internet, or this special, TV show that you have to go through where we take these things seriously, and then the rest of society, it's business as usual. I don't know if that's really going to, resolve the issue. I think that what we're talking about is a social change. As I told Joan a moment ago, we've become very comfortable, with just some god-awful perceptions, beliefs, and behaviors, and these things have been given aid and comfort, by Fox News and various and sundry other sources, till now, people are very comfortable saying what Joe McPherson said, okay? Even though there is no statistical basis to it. And I've tried to pin readers on this, because I've answered a few reader emails too, although hopefully not like Malcolm, but I've answered a few too. And I've had readers tell, well, those are statistics, those are only numbers. But talk to people, and people will tell you, I don't even know what that means. One guy told me, and this was the funniest thing, told me that if he and I, he's a white guy, an older white guy, this is years ago, if he and I were walking through some bad neighborhood in Detroit, that I would get a pass, and that he would be the guy to get mugged, okay? Okay, now this is overlooking all the, this is overlooking reality, but I just get this picture of the mug, it's like this feeling that crime is a political statement, so that you've got a mugger, standing behind the wall going, no, he's black, no. let him pass. Let him pass. People mug. You get mugged because that's what they do for a living. They punch a clock. Okay, mugging time. That's what they do. And the person who gets mugged is the person who looks like, one, he or she has the most and is the easiest target. That's it. There's no black pass for mugging. But I could not convince this guy that it didn't exist. So we got all of these fantasies and all this stuff that masquerades for reality. I think we really need, and I don't know if it's, you say create a space. I don't know how it happens, but we need to induce and inject some reality into this discussion because it's insane. Was it Donald Trump? No, I forget one. They all run together in my head, but one of those folks said today that Black Lives Matter is a terrorist. No, Chris Christie said that Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization. Yeah, it's a terrorist organization. Really? Who else? Yes.
I was lucky enough to live in Houston, Texas, and get involved with a group called the Center for the Healing of Racism. And I had never seen anybody talk about racism before, so I thought, well, I'm going to go find out about it. I dragged my husband there, and they had a wonderful way to talk about racism in very subtle ways. You'd share your ideas of what you thought, and mostly it's not what you think, it's what you feel. And you realize if you do a course like that you have these subtle things. You're not hateful. I'm not a hateful person. I never wanted to hurt anybody. But you have these subtle things, there's a black man, I better move over here a little bit. All these subtle things we don't realize. And so you need courses like that, which I can help you with if you want. I'll put you in touch with some people. But my other question I had for you earlier, where'd you grow up? Here?
I grew up in L.A.
L.A.
And let me speak to what, just give me the hook whenever you want me to get down here. I'll answer questions until Carson.
The cows aren't even near. Okay, we're going to go on for a minute then. Let me just say, you hit it very squarely on the head. And one of the reasons that it's hard to talk about racism in this country is because when you do, people feel personally indicted. Oh, there's a black guy down at work, and we're very friendly, And heck, I bought the new Beyonce CD. I mean, how can you? And people really don't get what is actually entails. When we talk about the structure of privilege, it is not talking about, or structural racism. I'm not talking about what you are or are not personally in your life. I don't really care what you are or are not personally in your life. It's one reason I never wrote a column about the kids on the white kids on the frat boys on the bus who were singing the racist song. It was some stupid kids. It was immaterial. Okay. Here's what is dangerous. Here's what structural racism looks like. I'll tell you what structural racism looks like by talking about structural sexism. I'll tell you a story. About 10 years ago, we bought new tires for the van. About a week after we got the tires, the right front tire develops this really nasty, this big bulge. My wife takes the car back to NTB and says, look at this. We got this bulge in the tire. What are you going to do about it? I need you to fix it. She comes home to me half an hour later. The woman is fuming. Okay, the woman is furious. The man has treated her like she didn't exist. He's treated her with great contempt. No, ma'am, I'm sorry. You must have hit a curb. You must have done something wrong to the tire. There's nothing wrong with that tire. He won't even put it up on the rack. I go up there, not even wanting to talk about the tire. I'm just upset about how he's treated my wife. Before I can get 2 words out, he's got my key. The car is up on the rack, and he's going, oh, well, yeah, you see, that's a very rare defect. You don't see that very often, But you just wait there in the waiting room. There's some magazines over there, and I'll replace your tire for you. You'll be on you, and we're on our way in like in half an hour. Okay, now what does this mean? Okay, am I a sexist? No, at least I hope not. I think most of the women in my life would vouch for me, But am I a beneficiary of structural sexism? Am I a beneficiary of a society that is biased toward people like me? Yes. I cannot be a male in America and not be a beneficiary of structural sexism. You cannot be white in America and not be a beneficiary of structural racism. It is simply impossible. So when I talk about these things, people, the problem is people feel themselves personally indicted. I don't know who you are in your personal life, and I really don't care. But I do know that there are inherent biases that accrue to your benefit. That's just the way it is. There are inherent biases that accrue to your benefit, and I think that that's a bad enough situation. But when you deny the existence of those biases, doesn't everyone get treated like this? Can you imagine if I said that to my wife? Honey, what's wrong with you? Doesn't everybody get treated like this when they go to the tire store? you know, then you compound the problem. You see what I'm saying? Okay. There was somebody back here. Yes.
How do you visualize activism today and in the future as compared to Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, Martin Luther King, Toussaint?
I don't know what, I can't speak
To the future, I do know that for a good part of this, or this young century, my concern has been where's the energy, because I only see apathy. I don't have that problem, say, the last 5 years. I see a lot of energy. Now I'd like to see some focus. There's a lot of, Black Lives Matter is an example of some great energy. Occupy movement was an example of some great energy. But okay, guys, now that, and ladies, now that we're paying attention to you, and now that, you've got our ears, what's the program? What is the law or the policy that you want us to pass? What is the change that you want to implement? What are the steps here? And that, I think, is where, modern activism has not yet, achieved full maturity. People forget when Dr. King and these people, when John Lewis was marching across the Selma, the Edmund Pettus Bridge, he wasn't doing it for his health. He wasn't doing it for a show. He was doing it to convince Lyndon Johnson to sign the Voting Rights Act. When those people were marching in Kelly Ingram Park and having the dogs and the hoses set on them, it wasn't just for their health. It was, okay, we need a Civil Rights Act. Okay, so I think that I need to know from all of these movements, not just the Black Lives Matter movement, but the Occupy movement and these other movements. Okay, what's the plan? What are we pushing for? Who are our allies in this? And what is it that we're going for? That, I think, is what's missing, but I'm hopeful that it's coming. And if and when it does, then you may see some big changes in this country. At least I hope. Yes.
First, it's a real privilege to meet you and hear you speak. Thank you very much, Kathy, Claire. Thank you for putting this together. This is amazing. You talked about privilege, and this is a privilege for us to hear you. You left us hanging when you finished reading. It was apparently the day before or after the election of.
It was election day, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Even though there's still this situation of structural racism, in these last few years since then, has anything significantly changed?
You mean because of President Obama?
Yes.
Exactly.
I think that what happened with President Obama
has been very interesting, and I love it when people say that Obama has created more racial division in this country. that is one of the funniest statements to me, because Obama, what's happened with Obama is that he has scared the bejesus. I probably shouldn't say that on a Sunday. He has scared the heck. He scared the heck out of a lot of folks, and reminded them of demographically what time it is. Okay, because if you really look at Obama's record on race, he's been rather tepid, and I don't say that as a criticism. I think that's the only way he could be. I think that if he jumped out, and went full Malcolm or even full Martin, then he's got a lot of people on his, he's losing a lot more support than he's already lost, and he is suddenly no longer the president of the United States. He's the black president of the United States. So I understand why he did that, but the fact of the matter is, it's just kind of funny that this guy who's been rather tepid, whose major statement on race since his election was probably, if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon, is suddenly depicted as, this guy has been very divisive. The reason that Obama is perceived as divisive is because he is black and he exists as president of the United States. That's the only reason, okay? And so it's, what I think that Obama's election has done is to sort of bring a lot of stuff into the open. A lot of stuff that was hidden, a lot of stuff that maybe people didn't even know they carried themselves, he has forced it to the surface. And I think that's been a very fascinating process. I was reading a Twitter feed this morning, and you criticize every president and you criticize Obama. I don't care, but the criticisms are so over the top. Socialist America hating, terrorist, the country's worst. I mean, just on and on. It's like, really? Seriously? Do you remember the last guy? It's just, it just becomes so crazy that that what we're talking about here is not related to a performance in office. Okay, we're talking about something deeper, and maybe they won't even admit it to themselves, but it's there. I'll kind of ignore the side of the room. Yes, hi.
There was a interview on one of the network TVs that I saw of a very well-educated black man giving an interview in New York City about his two sons that he had two, they were teenagers, and he says to his sons, you cannot walk the streets ever by yourself. You cannot put up the hood on your hoodie. You may not be without your friends. You have to be back at a certain time. So it seems like there's this catch-22 going on where black families are giving this message to protect their children. At the same time, the white community is attacking these young teenagers. So where is the solution? Where is the stop to this cycle? Because black families are having to protect their children, so they're giving them this message of that the problem is out there.
I think the stop to the cycle is,
as I said a moment ago, first we have to realize that we have a problem, which I think a lot of us are resistant to. But what you're talking about is what pretty much every responsible black family does. I was teaching my grandson to drive earlier this year, and part of the lesson was, okay, let's pull over here. I'll play the cop, you play you, and we'll talk about your reactions in various circumstances. You should not have to do that, okay? And and the fact that African American, not only the fact that African Americans families do that, but also the fact that many people hearing that will accuse them of overreaction or try some other way to mitigate it. That's the problem. We are not judged to be authoritative witnesses to our own experience so often. People don't want to believe. What I found is that if people don't want to believe something, they will go out of their way not to believe it. And you've seen that from the Rodney King beating, the videotape. You've seen that from the Tamir Rice. You see it over and over and over again. If people, I don't know what the psychological name is for it. I'm sure there is one. But if somebody absolutely is invested in another reality, facts are very weak cudgels to get them to sort of, change and see things as they really are. They really have difficulty with it. So I'm sure I'm not as hopeful as you or as inspiring as you'd like that I should have been on that answer. But the best thing that I think we can do is get people to confront the fact that there is a problem. We get people to concede that there is a problem, then we go a long way toward finding a solution. Has anybody seen the it's online, the bike theft video? You've seen that? Okay, that to me is the best. If you've never seen it, when you get out of here, Google bike theft and what would you do? There's a TV show called What Would You Do that set up a scenario. They've got a white kid in the park stealing a bike. I mean, wide open, wire cutters and everything, just stealing a bike. White people walk past this kid for an hour. Hardly anybody bothers him. They put a black kid, in that same situation. People are stopping. What are you doing there? And they've got their video cameras out so they can get evidence for the police and the whole deal. They put a pretty white girl out there. 5 guys stopped to help her. Okay? You got to see this video. I mean, this video is amazing. What Would You Do is the TV show, and it's the bike theft video. But I mean, that speaks to the bias, but also the fact that when they asked these people, they asked the white people who were harassing the black kid, would you have done the same thing if it had been a white kid? Well, of course I would have. And they're not lying because that's what they believe. But we know, because we've just watched people just like them walk past, a white kid, we know that's not what they would have done, but that's what they believe. You see what I'm saying? So that's the problem. The problem is to get people to face themselves and to face this country as is. Yes, sir.
Because we don't know that we're going to be able to change Fox News or any of that stuff.
I don't hope for that.
It seems to me that there truly are political things that need to be changed in order to make people understand the things that we're talking about today.
Yeah.
In other words, I'm a child at the same time you are. And if certain things were said by certain politicians at that time, exactly. Yeah. And I remember there was even on CNN, there was a, quote, expert spokesperson. And the Chiron said something like, a spokesperson for the John Birch Society. In other words, the media was giving him,
Right.
you know, some kind of
Legitimacy. Yeah.
And what we've done in this country is give legitimacy to things that never should have any legitimacy.
Exactly.
And we don't really call it for what it is. The thing that might be hopeful in terms of what you're talking about is not only books like yours, but the fact that like Ta-Nehisi Coates' book is number 1 or 2 on the bestseller list,
right,
which has sold hundreds of thousands of copies, which means people are reading, you know, his screed about, you know, after Ferguson and all of that. What do you make of that?
I think it's a good thing, but you know, but again, my question is, with apologies to the bookstore owner, you know, how many folks are going to read that? I mean, even though he's number 1 on the bestsellers list, how many people are actually going to bother to read what he's got to say? How many people are going to bother to read what I have to say?
You know, I mean, for better or for worse, you know, we live in a media, you know, video or saturated society. So I think it's very important. I don't think you're going to change Fox News, but I think CNN and some of the rest of these people could be a little bit more proactive and stop. And frankly, local news. Local news is a great villain in all this. Could stop giving aid and comfort to this kind of thinking. And I use that word advisedly.
I guess what I'm saying is the media is one thing,
right?
But there needs to be political change that happens as well in order to change policies that hurt people in one way or another. Whether it's, you know, not allowing Medicare to be fully funded, or you know, those kinds of real things that make a difference in people's lives.
You know what I think would
I don't want to present it as a cure-all, but I think it's kind of close if we could just get rid of the gerrymandering. You know, the whole gerrymandering issue where, you know, you get to basically choose your voters, and then the problem is you choose your voters, so you get to say, you know, the extreme version of whatever crazy thing it is that the people have elected you for. But then when you go to Washington and you're in a deliberative body where compromise is the key to getting anything done, you can't compromise. You are forbidden and prohibited from compromising, because the least little compromise, you know, is that, you know, they'll vote you out and get somebody further to the right, you know. And so these people are really hamstrung, you know, and as a result, the Congress is hamstrung, and as a result, the government is hamstrung by the whole gerrymandering phenomenon. And I don't know why we even allow this. I don't see why, you know, we don't just have, you know, get an impartial panel, let the judges do it. Let somebody that we can trust to be impartial and just draw the lines along sensible geographical, you know, boundaries. Just be done with it. That way, even if you tend to the right or you tend to the left, you can't be the extreme version of whatever it is you are, because you got some other people who are right here. And I think that induces a lot more compromise than what we're seeing. Because right now it's just a bunch of warriors, you know, cultural warriors, and they almost literally can't compromise. So I think that's a big part of the issue. Yes?
What about the fact that we have a Supreme Court that has declared that racism is over in this country, and as a response gutted the Voting Rights Act?
Yeah.
I think that could arguably be said to be one of the things that happened as a consequence of Obama's election.
I think you're probably right. I really get tired, with all due respect, to white Americans with this sort of self-congratulatory, racism is over, hey, isn't that wonderful? And as proof, we've got Obama, you know? And, you know, we never talk about, first of all, the stuff that Obama has gone through, you know, that no other president has gone through. I can't imagine anybody else in history, any other president in history, you know, being required to show his birth certificate. Do you really think that if he wasn't born in the USA, John McCain would not have picked up on that? Do you really think that? I mean, come on. And we spend we spend years and media attention, you know, debating, you know, where this guy was born. And never mind that there's also 2 announcements in the Honolulu newspaper. It makes me crazy, you know. I'm sorry, what were we talking about? It makes me crazy every time. I'm serious, what were we talking about? It makes me crazy every time I think about it. Supreme Court, thank you for bringing me back. I just got off on that, and that just makes me nuts. This sort of self-congratulatory thing because Obama is here, but you know, guess what? In the early part of last century, there was a black woman named Madam C.J. Walker. She became the first self-made woman to become a self-made millionaire. She's a black woman, made a fortune in hair care. And you could have as easily said, okay, racism is over then. We got a black woman who's a multimillionaire. She became a multimillionaire at a time when hundreds of black people were being lynched. You got Ralph Bunche. Somebody help me? Yeah, Ralph Bunche, the black UN ambassador, the 1940s. You've always had these people. You got Berry Gordy, Motown during this. So was racism over in the 1960s because everybody was dancing to Temptation songs?
They used that as a justification.
Exactly.
The Voting Rights Act.
Exactly.
And
They
the next
use
day, they started passing.
They use all of these exceptions. Exceptional people
having exceptional success, and they use it to say that, okay, it's all done. Racism is over. The playing field is even, and it gets really frustrating, and especially, as you say, when it's used as a justification for the end of the Voting Rights Act, because now we're seeing all of these restrictive laws coming into being, to where in a lot of places now it's going to be easier to get a gun than to get a ballot. What sense does that make? Yes, hi.
Hi, you were talking about the gerrymandering.
Mm-hmm.
We've already voted for that in this state, and it doesn't matter. I mean, we just can't. We voted, they redistricted, they still gerrymandered it, it's still going on, they can't, it should go to a judge.
I think it should,
I don't know that
should go to a panel of
that would
judges.
Yeah.
I think it should go to a panel of judges.
But the people voted for it, and
Yeah.
for that, for fair districts.
Yeah.
And we have illegal women voters that sued the state and won, and yet it's still.
I think it has to be a movement.
I don't think, it has to be something that gets their attention and hurts them where they live. I think it really has to be that, and I don't think that I don't think we're there yet. I think what you talked about is good, going through the ballot box. But I think there has to be something where, there's some economic pain, find a way to inflict some economic pain, find a way to inflict some shame or some embarrassment, because what they're getting away with is just insane, and it's the theft of democracy, and it's right beneath our very noses, Hi.
What do you think, what do you think the chances are that we're here 2 or 3 years from now and Obama has come out with a new book, something to the effect of audacity of action?
I think that I'm very curious to hear what Barack Obama is going to say once liberated from the presidency. He's a very cool cat, and okay, you call me this, and I am very curious. Now, maybe it'll be the same stuff. I don't know, because he's got an eye on history. But I'm dying to know what he's going to say afterward. And Michelle, I think, is just. Michelle, I think, is really going to go off the rails. I'm not a big fan of presidential memoirs, but those are 2 books. Mitch, reserve those for me now. Who else we got? Hi.
I just want to tell you how much I enjoyed your recent article about Ben Carson.
If I only had that
That was inspiring.
Thank you.
Let's take.
The only problem is that song has been in my head for 2 weeks now.
Let's take 2 more questions.
2 more. Now everybody gets shot. Yes.
I have been following your stuff for a long time, and I really appreciate the way you write. This is kind of a general question. I don't know how to word it, but when I read the news, I get an idea of what's happening, and then I go to your column, and I get a different perspective and a whole different idea. And it's sort of like it's coming from somewhere that makes more sense. And it's not always black and white. I think that's the other thing. There's a lot of stuff about race with other groups, and there's about others. Sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with race at all.
Right.
It just has to do with what's happening in the news. And I'm just wondering, where does that come from? How do you think like that? I respect you a lot, and I want to know why is it you can think like that and the rest of us can't? Because it makes sense to me when I read it.
I don't even know how to begin to answer that question.
I didn't know how to form it.
It's like we're 2 peas in a pod here. I try to educate myself on what I'm talking about, and I try to be intellectually consistent. I will say that. I try to make sure that if I'm saying this in this context because it
benefits people that I tend to agree with, would I say it in the same context if it benefited people I don't tend to agree with? That's something that I'm try to be very big on, intellectual and moral consistency. But frankly, a lot of the stuff that I say that people congratulate me for, it amazes me because it just strikes me as common sense. It's stuff that when I was growing up, everybody knew. I feel like sometimes, Joan, don't tell them I said this. Sometimes, they're paying me for stuff that, I'm not even going to say it. 'Cause, that's management over there. So let me back up. But what I feel like is, I'm getting paid. I'm sorry. Yeah, I know, so I'm not saying any of that. But what, I feel like, you're getting paid, wow, what a brilliant thought. And it's like, is it really brilliant? I mean, I got that from Mom. Mom said it's just basic common sense. It's just basic decency. It's basic moral whatever. So I don't know that I'm so amazing, or that the society has drifted so far away from the stuff that used to be common sense that when you say common sense, people are like, whoa, that is deep. The sky is blue. Wow, let me work with that for a minute. Wow, sky blue and fire is hot. You say, wow. Let me, that's kind of how I feel sometimes. Last question. Yes.
You said that the election of Obama had brought a lot of things to the surface that were lurking underneath, and you said there's still a lot of it still under the surface. And I think that even the questions about the politics is that we have to start not with the nation but with each of us to acknowledge that what is under the surface of each of us. Because I always think, I followed your column, I don't know now for how many years, and why is it that every time that I pick the paper, it happened today, this morning, and I see your column, the first thing that comes into my mind is that you're black. When I read Michael Putney, the first thing that pops into my mind is not that he's white. Yet when I read Andres Oppenheimer, the first thing that comes into my mind is that he's Jewish. And I just saw the other day a message from someone that was gay, and the first thing that I admire very much, and the first thing that popped into my mind was that this person is gay. And I am passionate against racism and anti-Semitism and homophobia, but yet it's still there. It just comes. It's like it's in the root. It's under the surface. It comes up, and I cannot control it.
Well, here's the thing.
People used to tell me all the time that I don't see you as black, and I'd go, okay, really? I really don't mind that you see me as black. When you spoke, I recognized that you had somewhere there's some Spanish in your okay, so I no, not quite that bad, But I recognize, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I have absolutely no problem with people thinking of me as black. The problem comes in with what do you define black as being? What do you define gay as being? What do you define Jewish as being? That's the problem. People have this weird mentality where they identify black with a set of negative characteristics. This is their subconscious bias, so that when somebody comes along who does not embody those characteristics, then they become uncomfortable, and there's sort of this need to separate them from that. That's what people mean when they tell me, I don't think of you as black. That's what they mean when they say, oh, Michael Jordan, he's not black, he's transcended race. Anybody remember hearing that? Oprah Winfrey has transcended race. No, Oprah Winfrey's a black woman from Mississippi. Michael Jordan is a black guy. It's not that they're not black, it's that your conception of what black is this narrow little bubble of gangsters and thugs and welfare women, okay? I mean, seriously, that's what the problem is. So I have no problem with anybody identifying me as black. It's just a matter of the fact that it's a matter of expand your comprehension of what black is, Don't try to put me into that little bubble that you have that in your mind where you keep black, Because I've been black for a long time, And I know that there are many different kinds, of black, just like there are many different kinds of anybody. You know what I'm saying? So, okay, thank you. I'll be right here.
We're going to go on the other side and do it. Listen, Leonard said that we do right by him, but he does right by us, doesn't he? Let's give him another round of applause. The autographing is going to be on the other side of the store as well. So thank you all for coming. We do have another event at 6 here. If you want to hang out all night, you're welcome to. Thank you for being here. Books are at